to be rid of any remnants of the old regime. With political changes going full steam ahead, Egyptians are cautiously optimistic. They're keeping a close watch, aware the people's strength lies in their stamina to keep pushing for the kind of Egypt they're still dreaming of. Shireen Tadros, AlJazeera, Cairo.
One other story from Egypt, an attempted jailbreak. At least 3 people were killed as riot police confronted inmates trying to escape from Damanhur prison north of Cairo. Another 10 were injured, including 2 men sentenced for life for their role in the assassination of President Anwar Sadat. And in Yemen, thousands have again been demonstrating in the capital Sana'a and the northern city of Sadr. A senior government official said that President Ali Abdullah Saleh would respond positively to an opposition roadmap for him to step down. Still to come on this news hour, denied immunity, how the murder trial of the CIA contractor is straining US-Pakistani relations. And security has stepped up at Frankfurt airport after the shootout that left 2 US soldiers dead.
2 generations face the past in order to understand the present. A young man embarks on a journey with his father in search of answers. Great changes in China have brought their traditional family way of life to a crisis point. Faces of China, at this time on Al Jazeera.
It is in the details, a look, a connection, the moments that reveal the truth. Award-winning documentaries from critically acclaimed filmmakers. Witness documentaries to open your eyes. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. Reminder of our top stories on Al Jazeera. Forces loyal to the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi have launched fresh airstrikes on the eastern town of Brega. But rebels say they're pushing government supporters back. The International Criminal Court has announced a full investigation into alleged human rights violations in Libya. Speaking at The Hague, prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo said Gaddafi's supporters have already been identified. And Egypt has a new prime minister after the man appointed by former President Hosni Mubarak resigned. Essam Sharaf has been selected by the country's military rulers to form a new cabinet and lead the government back to civilian rule. I'm joined on set now by Shadi Hamid, who's the director of the research at the Brookings Doha Centre. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. So, how much of a surprise is it to have this new man in charge of the country?
Well, Ahmed Shafi's resignation is not a surprise. People have been demanding that he resigned for quite some time now, and they were actually preparing a so-called million-man march tomorrow to ensure that he leaves. So the military was under a lot of pressure to force him to resign and find someone else who would be more acceptable to the protesters. What's interesting about Essam Sharaf is that he's really the first member of the opposition that has become prime minister really in decades in Egypt. He's someone who participated in the uprising. He was there in Tahrir Square with the protesters, so he's someone who didn't just join the revolution after it happened, but he was there when it was going on. So I think that's a positive sign, at least from the protesters' standpoint. And
it was interesting that there was some reports suggesting that part of the appeal of him was that people thought that he had been kind of uninfluenced by corruption when he had been in power in the past. Is that right, do you think? Yeah, he has a reputation for being less corrupt. I suppose it's all relative in the end. But he is someone who does seem to be well respected among a cross-section of Egyptians, and based on the initial response of some of the youth leaders, they seem to be relatively satisfied with his appointment. But presumably he's going to have to bring in some other new faces in order to satisfy them that there's not that same old story, that there's not kind of the old regime just still in place. Yeah, we're going to have to wait and see who fills in the rest of the cabinet, and the protesters have been very adamant about this. They don't want to see any figures from the old regime. Why are they going ahead with the protest on Friday if they've essentially got what they want?
Well, I think we'll see less of a turnout tomorrow because of that. But there are a whole array of other demands that the protesters have been highlighting: lifting of the emergency law, trying some of Mubarak's cronies before a court of law. Billions have been embezzled by the Mubarak family. They want to see those funds returned. I mean, so there are demands, there are things they want to see. There are complaints that the military hasn't been totally transparent during this phase of transition as well.
So, I mean, is he the right chap for it? I mean, obviously he had a good reputation as a transport minister, but it's quite a big leap, isn't it, from transport minister to ruling the country, or to running the country, I should say.
Exactly. He's not the ideal candidate, and no one thinks that he is, but he is a compromise candidate. He is someone who has managerial experience. That's important here. You don't want to have someone in a ministry who doesn't know how to run things. And that's always a problem in a revolution, that if none of the old people are allowed to participate in government, then you don't have people who know how to run things. So this is someone who seems to have a foot
in both
camps. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, Shadi Hamid, thank you very much indeed
Thank
for
you.
joining us, your analysis. Thank you. Now, rising food prices have been one of the triggers for much of the recent unrest throughout the Middle East and North Africa. And the UN's food agency is warning that food prices have risen to their highest ever since records began more than 20 years ago. The Food and Agriculture Organization says its food price index rose by 2.2% last month, and it's the 8th consecutive month that food prices have risen. The price hikes are being driven by the increasing cost of cereals, meat and dairy products. Sugar was the only food that didn't record an increase. It's now feared that an oil spike caused by the situation in Libya could further exacerbate the problem. Well, Caroline Herford is a spokesperson of the World Food Programme. She joins us now live from London. So it's quite a grim picture being painted. Is it a fair one?
Well, yes, it is of deep concern to us because in many ways these sort of food price hikes affect us in two ways. One, we're going to have to pay more for the food that we purchase to give to people, and two, the numbers of people who need our help go up.
So, I mean, there must have been a whole series of things that feed into it. What do you think are the main areas that push the prices up?
Well, rather as we saw in the 2007-2008 crisis, which was a combination of the food and fuel going up and then the financial crisis as well, we're now seeing that the food prices are, as the FAO report said, they've gone up. We're seeing that a certain amount of maize in the US is going into biofuels. We're coming in off the back of harvests which weren't perhaps as good in places like Russia because last year's fires and hot weather affected that. And it's a whole complex of factors, in fact, where it's a kind of unholy trinity, if you like. We've got high food prices, we've got emergency weather events, and we've got political instability. And where these intersect is really where they hit the vulnerable poor.
And the vulnerable poor in the past in these situations have rioted and so on. Are you expecting further unrest because of this?
Well, as you rightly said, certainly the high food prices are a factor in the political unrest because clearly when you're very poor and you are spending up to 80% of your income